Hello, everybody. Welcome in. I'm going to wait until we hit 5 o'clock to get started, just to see if anyone else slowly trickles in the next minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Jo Lang. I am your host for tonight's candidate forum. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This election for co-op directors is an essential part of being a cooperative, where representative democracy is one of the 7 cooperative principles. We want all the co-op members to vote, so please tell 10 friends to vote when you get your ballots, starting today. Your ballots will arrive via mail and email. Every member can vote for each position regardless of their home island or district. Every member votes in every election. Our voting is open until April 23rd. Ballots must be received by 10 o'clock a.m., and we announce the results at our annual business meeting on April 24th. That is going to be a virtual meeting. Afterwards, we celebrate our members at the in-person annual member festival on April 25th at 3 o'clock p.m. at the San Juan County Fairgrounds this year. For any questions or clarifications on this, please feel free to email our team at communications@opalco.com or visit our website at www.opalco.com. As a reminder, please keep yourselves muted during the forum, and we'll be using the Q&A feature to bring questions forward. The chat function is disabled for today's meeting. I'm pleased to introduce the candidates here with us tonight. We have Mark Madsen from District 1, Brian Silverstein from District 3, and Dr. Jerry Whitfield from District 4. I will be the timer for tonight, and I am joined by some other Opalco staff today, including Beth Stanford, who is helping to moderate questions, Russell Gary, and Foster Hildreth, our general manager. Steve Bowman is our moderator tonight, and he will go over how our process works. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Steve now.
Thank you, Jo. We're going to follow the League of Women Voters guidelines for civil discourse, asking questions and not making speeches, and at all times respecting all of the audience, the candidates, and our staff, so that we have a productive time, an opportunity for all of you to ask questions of the candidates, an opportunity for the candidates to be able to speak directly to you. We have a group of questions that have been provided by Opalco, and I'll start with those. And then we will go to questions from the audience, and Beth and Jo will review the questions and we'll ask as many as we can. We expect that the evening will be about an hour. And the process we use is that candidates get 3 minutes to introduce themselves to the audience. And then we move into questions. And if you have a specific question directed at one candidate, that candidate gets 2 minutes to answer it, and the other candidates can add their commentary for another minute. If it's a general question, then each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question. And then finally, after we've done both the questions provided by Opalco and the questions that have come from the audience, each of the candidates will have 1 more minute to essentially say thank you and answer any final comments or provide any final comments that they have. And then it'll be turned back over to Jo, and she has a few final comments to make, and then the evening will be done with. So hopefully for all of you, this will be an educational time, a productive time, and a time when you can feel like you're having a voice in the co-op. So with that, why don't we get underway with our opening comments from each of the candidates. It'll be for 3 minutes, and I'd like Mark to begin. Mark, please.
Hi, I'm Mark Madsen. I've lived on San Juan Island since 2006, and I've been a director at Opalco since 2015. I've done a number of other things around in the community. I was on the library board of trustees on San Juan Island from 2009 through 2021. I've worked with the Agricultural Guild, helping establish the Brickworks facility in Friday Harbor. And I am still on the board of the County Economic Development Council, working to strengthen our economy here in San Juan County. I'm running for re-election here to the Opalco board because I think we're in a very critical time. We are in the middle of a great amount of change in the energy industry. Prices are rising. We're trying to decarbonize the electricity supply. And at the same time, demand is hugely increasing from data centers and electric vehicles. And we're going to hear a lot about that tonight. But I'm running for re-election because we as an organization are in the middle of trying to make our local renewable energy generation project a reality. We've got a good start with Decatur. We've got a long way to go. And I'm here to ask for your vote tonight to continue that vital work, and you're going to hear a lot about how vital that is for our county. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back to you, Burley.
Thank you, Mark. Jerry, would you please spend your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Steve. Well, welcome everyone tonight. I'm sorry we can't see you in person, but we know you're there, and we'll try and keep it going fast enough so that you'll stay awake and be interested in what we've got to say. But like Mark, I've been on this board now since 2014, so just over 10 years. And a lot has happened in that time, and the board I think, has transformed during that time too, as we've become more focused on critical issues. And what I would like to say, is broad support for all three of us candidates here today. I think we're very fortunate in having probably the strongest board that we've ever had for Opalco, both in depth of experience and the type of experience too. So, although we're not each running against another candidate, I would support all three, well, all the other two candidates that are here tonight as being equally well versed in the affairs of Opalco and equally kitted out with their abilities and past experience to guide Opalco through what is going to be a fairly turbulent ride. As far as my background experience goes, I started off life as an aeronautical engineer. I specialized in jet engines. I worked for Rolls-Royce on the Concorde program for a number of years, and then I came over to Boeing, and I've worked as an engine specialist at Boeing. So I know turbo machinery pretty well. Not the kind necessarily that we use for generating electricity, but the basic principles are the same, and understanding efficiencies and costs and all that kind of thing go hand in hand. I then did a pivot in the middle of my career, and as I was getting more and more interested in what we called alternative energy back then, I started looking at other ways that we could substitute, get off coal, get off natural gas, and I happened to be good friends with people that were starting to turn wood waste into wood pellets. And I came up with the idea of the wood pellet stove as a clean way of heating homes, and basically in a carbon neutral way, on the basis that all the wood that we were burning was generating CO2, but all that carbon had been absorbed out of the atmosphere during the growth of the tree. So hence my entry into the energy field at a time when we were aware that carbon, oh gosh, she's gone red already. I will carry on during the questions.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Brian, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you for coming. My wife and I have been in Lopez residence for 12 years. I've been in the electric utility industry for 4 decades, and was the first elected to the board here in 2016. For 30 years, I worked at the Bonneville Power Administration, a federal utility that provides energy to consumer-owned utilities like Opelco. That gave me the opportunity to visit dozens of utilities in the Northwest. We have a great co-op here, and we have an excellent team, and that includes the board members. My objective on the board is to deliver our missions. For me, the most important is safety for our employees and everyone else. We need to keep the lights on by taking care of the facilities and supporting our employees. We will do our best to keep electricity affordable by managing the budget wisely and assist members who need help paying their bills. You must take care of the environment with a focus on reducing greenhouse gases, pursue all cost-effective energy savings, help members switch from propane and gasoline, and acquire home solar energy. We have an industry-leading Switch It Up program. Opelco must meet our growing energy needs. Here's the situation. There's a new Bonneville Power Agreement, and also energy costs are going up across the country. That will impact us. This is what we can do to serve our electric needs. Within the county, deliver more community solar and energy storage. Tidal energy is worth considering, and acquire energy sources on the mainland, working with other co-ops. We need to update our rate design. We have a unique utility with 2/3 of our costs for the wires. No matter how much the meters are spinning, we have to cover our costs every year. We should consider adding a new rate part based on members with high use. With Rock Island, we have delivered an excellent rural broadband service. It helps service online medical care without going on the ferry and for businesses. We should continue connecting members who want it. In summary, Opelco must make decisions transparently with our members.
Thank you, Brian. We'll move into the questions now. The first question, the region is in a period of major energy transformation away from carbon emitting sources. Where will Opelco get the capital to invest in required system upgrades and local renewable generators to keep the island supplied with reliable power during the transition? And Jerry, I'd like you to begin. And if anyone needs me to repeat the question, feel free. Just let me know.
So is this a 1 minute response?
No, this is 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. This is the crux of the matter, the job that we have to do. But I don't want to scare people into thinking that the lights are going to go out during the next year or even the next 2 years. I would like to predicate things by saying that the overall demand in the state is predicted to increase by 3% a year, or 25% in the next 25 years. I think that works out to be. But in San Juan County, our growth rate is not going to be as big. Sure, we are trying to convert as much of our heating load to electricity, much of our transportation energy to electricity, but still we have a relatively small population and a population growth rate which is going to drive our demand. It's not going up anything like a 3% per year. So locally here, I don't think we have as big a challenge as some of the other utilities in providing the extra power that we're going to need. So, my premise here is that, first of all, we live with Tier 1, which is the hydropower that we get from Bonneville, and we're not going to get any more of that. Our allocation every year is going to be the same as it has been for the last 10 or 15 years, and it's not going to increase over the next 25 years. So as this starts to run short, we're going to have to put in additional power, and we're going to have to be able to afford it without increasing the rates substantially. So how we do that, we don't know exactly today, but there will be a mix of renewable power from solar, and if we can get our heads and our finances around tidal power, then we'll seriously consider that as well. But there's still a lot of work to be done.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. Brian?
I agree with everything that Jerry said, and I think the challenge is in the 5 to 10 years. Unfortunately, for the next 4 years, there will be little, if any, federal or state grant funding. Traditionally, APALCO has borrowed from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We hope that will continue because they'll get loans at reasonable rates. As a backup, we have the National Rural Utilities Co-op. Actually, Jerry has a really brilliant idea we've talked about is some developers may be willing to fund a project, and then APALCO would have a contract to pay for that when the energy comes in. So if that works out, that would be a great idea.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Mark?
As Brian just alluded, a lot of the kinds of projects that we might need to do to add renewable and local generation, we had anticipated being able to access grant funding to do that, and that may not be possible, at least in the short to medium term horizon. We build infrastructure here at APALCO generationally. So we borrow from federal sources at ultra low interest rates compared to what the rest of the market is seeing these days. And we pay it back quite literally generationally over 30-year time cycles, right? That's how all of your transmission lines, that's how your distribution lines, your substations are all, the submarine cables are built and paid for. We don't pay for things all at once. And so you're going to see us not just pursuing the grant opportunities, but making judicious use of those rural utility service lending facilities, as well as other commercial lending facilities, to make prudent generational investments in the infrastructure that we need.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Great. The next question, there's often lots of not in my backyard or NIMBY pushback on new generation projects. How can APALCO influence our community when faced with loud NIMBY responses? And Brian, would you begin, please?
It is frustrating. And here are two things that I'm thinking of. One is to prepare better information and then to spend more time talking with our members and council members.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mark?
My personal feeling about this, and I'm going to be really blunt about this one. I think that as the reality of the energy supply challenges that we face in the region starts to be felt, we're going to have a more honest conversation locally about this challenge. I think we are going to come as a community to see it as a point of pride that we have some local renewable energy projects that can help sustain us when there are regional problems and even brownouts in the future, right? I think we're going to come to a point where we are proud of our local renewable energy projects, but I think it's a hard road to get there. I think we need to do a good job of communicating better the dire need for these projects to go forward. I think we need to sit down and have conversations with portions of the community about where siting of projects can happen. And I think we need to basically, of course, commit to staying away from sensitive historical and conservation sites, which of course we do. I think change is going to be generational here in the sense. I think the folks that come after us that are younger than I am are going to grow up in a world where they find it normal to have solar generation in their communities. And I think we have to help everybody get there.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Jerry?
Well, I think the NIMBY type objections that we think might happen here, and surely will, Opalco, I think, in the past has shown that they have been very good in dealing with objectives, and we've dealt with it with considerations of fish and whales and the other type of environmental issues that we've been faced with. But the best way to handle NIMBYism is, first of all, to listen and give careful consideration and respond with accurate, truthful answers and polite responses. I think if we use that as a continuing modus operandi, which Opalco, in my experience, has demonstrated in the past, we should handle NIMBYism pretty well.
Great, thank you. The next question is, Opalco's current rate structure collects almost half of the revenue to cover fixed costs through the kilowatt energy use charge. As we become more energy efficient and embrace more renewable energy, Opalco won't collect enough kilowatt revenue to cover fixed cost. How would you address this rate structure dilemma? And Mark, would you go first, please?
Sure. The traditional rate structure doesn't work well in a number of ways. And I think that, we've seen questions from a number of people about new and alternative rate structures. The traditional rate structure is what everyone is used to, and that's really its only virtue, in a sense. We need to explore, and we are, as a board, in this year's rate design study. We're studying rates that alter the balance between the fixed charge and the kilowatt hour charge at various levels. We're going to, as I'm sure questions will come up, we're looking at demand charges to fairly recover the costs from large peak time users of electricity. I think that that's very important. And I know that some of the people who have shown up here tonight have led the charge in terms of those issues. I think as we have the meter infrastructure to do this, things like time of use rates and controllable devices that allow us to, shift things like EV charging away from peak time are going to be absolutely critical in keeping the rates affordable while we change their structure. And then finally, the most important thing is, as we propose all of these new rate structures, we need to work with members to have a way for members to understand how it's going to affect them, if it's going to affect them.
Okay, thank you.
I'll leave it there.
Very good, thanks, Mark. Jerry?
Well, I won't reiterate what Mark has said. I agree entirely with the issues that he's brought up that we have to consider as a board. And there's no such thing as a totally fair rate structure that everyone is going to be treated exactly the same, just because we're too complex and we run our houses and our commercial businesses in different ways. The thing is, we've got to try and keep the rates as affordable as we possibly can for everyone out there. And I think that's the main thing we need to be known as a board, is that we're looking at ways that we can keep those rates affordable and the increases get as small as we possibly can make them each year. So, that's what I will be driving for. And when we consider different types of electricity that we may have to take on, different shortages of electricity and the impacts that will have, and give consideration as well to those that can afford electricity less ably than others, but need it just as badly. So we've got to balance income disparity, we've got to balance big houses and small houses, and we've got to pack all this with electricity that we know will be there and we can supply on a continuous basis.
Thank you, Jerry. Brian?
This is an issue for all utilities, and it's even more vexing here in Opalco. A few utilities are beginning to make changes. We just engaged one of the top experts in this field. They made a presentation at our last board meeting, so you might have heard from that. And we're looking forward to their recommendations. And once we get their information, the next step is for us to talk with the members and get their view on it.
Very good. Thank you. The next question provided the high cost of living in the islands, especially housing, and a very competitive labor pool in the industry has made it challenging to hire and retain staff. What ideas can you offer for hiring and retention of qualified employees? And Jerry, would you go first, please?
Yes, indeed. Well, obviously, retaining good employees is important for any business, and I think we're very fortunate with the standard of particularly linemen that we have, but also support staff within Apalco. You know, we have approximately 50 employees. It's a broad spectrum of people to keep satisfied, and it's a big payroll for the company to be able to withstand. So, you know, I'm all in favor of giving as much as we can to our people, and to be able to retain them and to be able to train them properly and keep them incentivized to work for us. On the issue of housing, we've had discussions, you know, amongst the board in the past. I've always been of the opinion that we should not be in the business of providing housing for our staff. Mainly because this is not a core competency of the company or of the board. But, you know, I know that housing is a problem, the cost of housing. There's little we can do to actually affect things there, other than to try and help them find suitable homes when we take on new staff, that type of thing. So, you know, we need to pay them well. We pay our general manager well to be able to negotiate the union contract every few years, and we're very grateful for that. And we take it from there.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Now, I believe that Apalco offers appropriate salary and benefits to hire and retain employees, and this is a great place to work. So here's an example where the directors may not agree. So I'm actually interested in the idea of building some housing on Apalco property. And then we would lease the employee, them to the employees, and they would have to pay to recover the costs. So it would not go into our rates. And if they purchase a home, which would be wonderful, then we can lease it to someone else. So it'll be a good conversation among the board in the next year or two.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
I'm going to kind of split the difference between what Brian and Jerry said. I also serve on the Economic Development Council board, and I know that there are very few large employers in the county that aren't facing the issue of worker housing, and many of them are talking about worker housing initiatives. Some of them are doing it and just building worker housing. Nobody running a business wants to be in the business of being a landlord for their employees, right? And so I agree with Jerry. This is not our core competency. It is, however, something that we may be forced to do in some form or another. The ideas that Brian just outlined in order to not put that on the backs of ratepayers are important ones that we will continue to discuss. I think we're looking at the different models that other employers in the county are coming up with. And of course, I think if we can partner with an existing housing organization to work on this problem, we absolutely should, because of exactly what Jerry said. It's not our core competency. It is, however, our problem to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Another question that moves away from what we've been talking about. What role should the co-op play in state and regional public power affairs? How do you see Apalco influencing public policy and elected officials? And if Brian, you'd start with that one.
Yes, I got it. Just a moment.
Sure. I'll read it again if you'd
No,
like.
I've got the question. Had some
Okay.
notes here and I can't remember where I put them.
Oh.
Oh, I found it. Okay. So it's important for Apalco to be aware of what's going on at federal, state, and county levels. We need to understand their impacts that would be on co-ops and ultimately with our members. Since we're a small utility, we need to work together with smaller utilities to influence policy at all levels. We're really fortunate with our GM here. Foster meets with people in Olympia. He even occasionally goes to DC. He works with our other co-ops in the region. And so we're well taken care of, and we're very unlikely to be surprised. But you have to stay on top of it.
Okay, Mark?
Sure. For a small co-op, I think we actually play a role greater than our size in regional conversations, in given our membership in PNGC, which is a cooperative of cooperatives. I think we participate strongly in our state and national electrical co-op organizations, which perform lobbying with our elected officials. And I think a number of us on the board are well connected to our elected officials and put a lot of time into communicating the urgency of the challenges we face, et cetera. So I think the role we need to play is using every means necessary that we have available to us to communicate with the regional players in the power field, our elected officials, people in the bureaucracies, the Department of Commerce, et cetera. And I think we do that. And I think we need to keep doing that because the challenges and issues that we face are not going to lessen over the next 10 years.
Okay. Jerry?
Well, I think the key to answering this question is the strength in numbers. As a small utility, represented by only 2 or 3 people in the Washington State Legislature, none of which are particularly versed in the issues of electric power generation or carbon mitigation, that type of thing. Just a few of us talking to very few legislative members is not going to achieve very much. I've served on the statewide board of WRECA, Washington Rural Electric Cooperatives Association, now for 6 or 7 years. I know every GM and many of their senior staff, so I understand a lot better through that continuous meeting of the issues that they have, some of which are similar, some of which are the same as we have. So having cohesion of all of the rural electric cooperatives in the state is very, very important. That way we have a lot more clout with the state legislators. The PNGC, as Mark and Brian have mentioned, is a co-op of co-ops. That gives us, I think, better bargaining power with BPA, and that in itself is good. But also they become another lobbying cooperative, which does indeed help us. Having said all of that, what we do need, and we have been singly unsuccessful with so far, is to actually generate needed legislation and get that adopted and supported in at the state level so that we can be much more proactive rather than reactive in a lobbying sense. So that's something that Foster and I have been advocating for quite some time, and I will continue to advocate for it.
Thank you, Jerry. Moving to Rock Island. Rock Island provides internet connections to nearly 60% of the Opalco membership. How should Rock Island and Opalco prioritize reaching the balance of the membership with access to broadband? And Mark, if you would begin.
Yeah, definitely. I think, there was a startup phase for Rock Island, and when we were just figuring out how to do the build out, we were building as fast as humanly possible to get this done. I think we're now not really in the startup phase anymore. We are a profitable enterprise, and I think it's important for us to balance the speed with which we can build out with maintenance of the core finances of Rock Island. We need to stay profitable, and within that, the board is committed to building as fast as possible to reach everybody in the county. But I think what you're going to see from us is balancing those two things, financial prudence with building as much infrastructure to reach as many people as humanly possible.
Okay, Jerry?
Well, I think the key to the last phase of the build out, as Mark rightfully pointed out, we've gone through all the lower hanging fruit, first of all, people that were close to where our fiber has been strung out, and the cost of bringing it from there to the, into the neighborhoods and into the individual homes was much less, which, allowed us to get in there. And the demand was much higher at that point because no one had decent internet in San Juan County. So we went up a good steep curve of adoption, first of all. Unfortunately, we haven't proceeded up that curve quite as fast as I would have hoped and as was projected by the staff of Rock Island early on. But be that as it may, we still have quite a ways to go. There is more competition out there, particularly from Starlink. And I don't think we can ignore it, nor do we want to actually be competitive with them and provide the same kind of service. So we'll never get to 100%, but I think where we're at today, just over 50%, we need to get up a good bit higher than that. And frankly, the only way to do that is with more funds, money, because we're going to have to support those people that can less afford it, that have got much bigger bills, to bring fiber to their homes. And we are not a Comcast or a big company like that, which these utilities can go out and put fiber, string it around all the neighborhoods first, and then sell it to their competitors. We're going to have to find a way of doing something on a lower cost scheme of that, but still providing additional fiber to meet the needs of the county.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Joe and Beth to see what questions have come from the audience.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we have a couple of questions. First one is from Chom Grecian. She says, I'm concerned about how small electricity users are currently subsidizing very large users who have very high peak demand, driving up Opelco's demand charge, making the electricity rates expensive for everyone, what is each Opelco member planning to do to address this unfair rate structure and incentivize more conscious consumption of our limited electricity supply?
Okay. Brian, would you begin, please?
Sure. Everyone should pay for what they use. And every month you get a bill for the energy you use. But as Chum noticed, that we don't look at the high amounts that you might use in an hour. And it's a big issue in the wintertime when the system is stressed. I believe some sort of charge needs to be made for large peak in some way. And as we said earlier, we're working with one of the top rate experts in the US. They will look at Opelco's system, and they're also looking at other utilities. So I look forward to their suggestions, but I think we definitely need to do something different.
Thank you. Jerry?
John, thank you for the question. Appreciate that. And I like the way you put it. It's mansions versus the rest. That certainly typifies what the problem is here. But I also appreciate your recent write-up in the Salish Current, where you identified a number of solutions to this problem. And rather than go into them all in the short time we have here, I would say that each of the solutions that you have offered, we will and we do regularly consider. And it depends on our metering system as to whether we can capture all of the information that we need there, first of all. And we have to consider the complexity and a number of other issues. But the whole premise here is to be as fair as possible across the whole membership So we're not penalizing people prematurely. So we appreciate your inputs. We will certainly take note of your suggestions, and we'll take it from there.
Mark?
Yeah, and try not to repeat too much of what Brian and Jerry said, but I think I think what you're gonna find is that the board in general is very interested in moving towards rate designs that include a demand component. And as I said a little bit earlier, as we have the metering infrastructure, other rate components like possibly time of use in the future that help us do a better job billing members fairly for the impact that they have on the infrastructure, right? And that's a big part of what we're talking about here, because the larger the demand peak, as you well know, the more expensive the infrastructure is that we have to build to handle just the peak, not our average usage. So I think that things like demand charges, which are being studied in this year's rate design study, as Brian noted with the firm that we've hired, are going to be a critical component. And I don't think you're going to, it is not that we're not interested in moving in that direction. I think we have to figure out how to bring everybody along, because I think there are folks like you, Chom, that are very familiar with this kind of rate design and study, and this kind of rate component. And I think we need to figure out how to explain this in a way that people will understand who are not familiar with it. And we need to show people what their bill will look like. And if we can do that and communicate with people, then I think we can move to having rates in our set of tariffs that include components that do exactly this.
Okay. Beth? Another question?
Okay, we've got another one from Robert. Robert asks, is there any target megawatt for San Juan County local power generation? Also like the megawatt presently in place?
Okay. Jerry, would you like to start with that one?
Can I just ask Beth to repeat the question? I didn't quite catch all of the question there.
Sure.
Yeah,
Robert asks, is there any target megawatt for San Juan County local power generation? Also, like the megawatt presently in place?
Do we have a target megawatt? Well, our target is to meet demand on a continuous basis. And I think we all know that we are a winter peaking utility, meaning that our biggest demand is during the cold winter months, because heating is the biggest demand on our electrical system. And on top of that, we are encouraging people to convert from carbon emitting sources like propane and even wood to use electricity. So heating, we're needing more megawatts to heat our homes in the future because of the transition to heat pumps and because we have the high demand. So yes, we know exactly what our peak demand is. It's up close to 90 megawatts, I believe. And that brings up another major concern of ours that the board is going to have to deal with, and it's a huge, huge cost consideration, is that the main trunk line that serves the islands from Anacortes out to Decatur, we're getting near its peak, and we're going to have to put in an additional major line in the future. So that's a bigger financial consideration than anything else, frankly, that we're being faced with in the future with regard to electricity demand.
Thank you. Brian? Excuse me, Brian?
So as we've discussed, almost all our power comes from Bonneville. And right now we're at the point where it's just being able to meet us in our winter capability. And sometimes we've even had some time in the last few years where we had to buy additional energy. Now Bonneville is obligated to provide that energy to us, but not at the low cost We have to pay it at the market. And if it's a small amount, that's not a big deal. We're not making an investment, and it's in the near term, that's the right thing to do. About where we are now, if I remember correctly, our existing Decatur solar project is about 0.5 megawatt. The one that we were planning on putting on San Juan was about 1 megawatt. And we've been thinking for maybe another couple million more. But to me, another important part, which we've started from the beginning, is storage, is batteries, because not only does it make it flatten it out, but it can help us really more in the winter, both just to keep the costs down and if we have trouble with the cables. So those are some of the things that we need to do together.
And Mark?
Yeah, I think it's what Brian said about storage is absolutely critical. We're not going to be able to build probably as much local generating capacity as we would like to, just because of the realities of financing and siting these projects. So the projects we do build, if we're able to build 3 or 4 more community solar projects around the islands, on the different islands, they need to be paired with solar. And they need to be as large as possible. I think I was just looking at my notes, and 540 acres of agri-solar projects here in the islands could contribute up to about 30% of our annual load, or about 90 million kilowatt hours. We may not get all the way there, but if every bit of that we can build paired with storage, is going to dramatically lessen the load on the undersea cable to the mainland, maybe push off the need to, give us more time to put in that additional undersea cable. And it's going to lessen our dependence on peak price power from the mainland, which is the most expensive and getting more expensive all the time. So
Great. Thank you.
sure.
Beth, any other questions?
Oh, we've got time for one more question. Michael asks, I'm considering rooftop solar. Because of base rate charges, it will take 40 years before they pay for themselves. What should I say to persuade my wife?
Okie doke. Mark, would you like to start that one, please?
Yeah. I live in the woods, so I'm not even sure what my timeline is. For me, I would think about it in 2 ways, right? Partially, it's about making the project pay for itself, but partially, a solar project, especially if you combine it with a home battery system, is going to drastically increase your reliability, especially when we hit those cold snap periods when we get very close to our capacity. So I would try to think about it in kind of a dual track. Yes, the project has to pay for itself over some kind of time frame, but it isn't just about the money. It's also about reliability, and it's about weathering the contingencies of where we live. I hope that helps.
Hopefully it will for his wife.
And at the moment, we have the Switch It Up program where you can borrow the money with on-bill financing at rates that are ultra low. They're lower than any interest rates any of us are likely to see in our lifetime. So now is the time to do it.
Brian?
I think that's a great question, and I understand the numbers. I only have a few panels because I have trees all around me, but I've bought into the community project. And it's a challenge around the world now. And saying California, which has been leading, they are adjusting how much they are providing to members who are taking solar, and how that takes to what they're paying. It's a challenge. And we're going to have to think about how that'll work. And it's harder for us because where we live. If we were in Eastern Washington, it would be much more valuable, and that may be the way to go. But look at the numbers, and as I said, a 2% interest for 10 years, that should make it a little bit better for you.
And Jerry?
Well, if I were your financial advisor, I know what my answer would be to you, that a 40-year payback is there are other places you can put your money and get a much quicker return than that. Having said that, though, there are other considerations here. First of all, can you get that? Can you redesign the system to give you a better payback? Because as I understand it, there are many systems out there that are closer to a 20-year payback than a 40-year payback. And if that can't be done, then the other thing that you really have to consider is how important is it to you personally to be reducing your carbon footprint. And I think as time goes on, we're all realizing that that's a much, much harder question to answer, and we have to do everything we can. And to a certain extent, cost be damned, we have to do it. So that would be my answer to you, is to think how important that is and how best you can reduce your carbon footprint. And definitely putting rooftop solar on is one of the few things we can do up in this part of the world.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to closing comments from the candidates. And Brian, would you start us off, please? You have a minute.
Thank you. So in summary, APALCO must make decisions transparently with our members, and that starts right here. We have 3 excellent candidates to serve again on the board. And I understand there's only one person running for each district, but it's important that you return your ballot. APALCO bylaws require a quorum of 10% for all voting. So please vote. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian. Jerry?
Again, yes, thank you for being here. Even though I can't see you, I'd much prefer to be able to go eyeball to eyeball on these kind of things. But anyway, thank you for being here. Please, we respect the board that board members you've got in front of you. It is a very strong group of candidates here, and I know you don't get to choose between each of us, but I think it's a great thing for APALCO to have the strength of these 3 candidates continuing to serve on the board. And please be respectful of the fact we have to get a quorum, 10% of our membership out there voting. So please encourage everyone you know to come out and vote. Thank you.
And Mark, please.
Thank you all for taking your time at the end of the day to come and talk to us about energy. The most difficult challenge we face, well, we face a lot of difficult challenges, but I think the real difficult challenge that we face is getting the community engaged enough to talk about some of the issues that we face. And I'm going to use my last 30 seconds simply to make a pitch that after this election, after you've all voted, help us get people to come to some of the town hall meetings and gatherings where we talk about these new rate structure ideas. There are great ideas, and Sean and Chris, you've been instrumental in laying some of those out. But unless we get that word out to the rest of the membership, it's going to be hard for people to understand the changes that we need to make. So thank you very much for your engagement, and thank you for your vote. It means everything to us.
Great. Thank you, candidates. And I will turn it back over to Joe for final comments.
Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate you being here with us again this year to help to moderate the event. And thank you so much, candidates, as well, for your answers, and for members for submitting questions. I want to give a reminder to everybody that we are recording this meeting, and this will be posted on our website in the next week or so. And we do also have all info about our candidates on our website. If you head over to our election hub, you can read their candidate bios and understand a little bit more in depth if you missed anything from the answers to their questions this time around. I do also want to let everybody know that if you have additional questions, or if you have questions that you felt went unanswered, please feel free to reach out to us. You can send any of your questions to communications@opalco.com. If the questions aren't communication related, we will get them to the right person and get those answers for you. And we really do appreciate when you send questions, if it's anything general OPALCO related, or if it's a little more specific or related to a specific candidate. We want to make sure that we're getting your questions and getting your answers back to you. So please feel free to reach out. And then again, a big thank you so much to everybody for taking the time out of your day, and candidates as well. And Steve, thank you so much. And we look forward to the next event where we can interface with our members. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you at
Thank
the
you.
annual meeting.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.